a great attendance today. Many folk are away on other duties. Could I have apologies in order of business, John?
Apologies, Chair, from Councillors Baxter, DeVink, Coventry, Wallace, Montgomery and Russell. The order of business as published.
Any declarations of interest? Okay, thank you. Can we move on to performance reports? Item 4, health and social care. Alison.
Thank you, Chair. Won't run through in detail, but we'll pick up some highlights and give updates in a couple of areas as well where possible. In integration, we were talking about the fact that the Head of Health post had been advertised. Just like to say that Alistair Short was successful to be the Head of Health and is due to start on the 24th of March. I'm sure there'll be opportunities to meet at that point in time. As it states there, some of the Middle Lothian Health Management team have now come into Fairfield House, which is making that joint working process much easier. So there's myself, the Head of Health, and I've forgotten Hamish's job title, which is awful. Clinical Director, who's got the responsibility for the GPs in the area, is also located in Fairfield House, which does make it much easier. We're also looking at some of the third-tier managers across health and finding a way for them to move into the building as well. In older people's services, the single service for dementia team started on Monday. They're now co-located in Bonnyrigg Health Centre. As we're only on day 3, it's a little early to say what the impact of that will be, but it's been a long time coming. There's been an awful lot of work that's gone into making that a reality, so we're looking forward to seeing some real benefits for people with dementia moving forward. In terms of the 8 Pillars framework for dementia, that's a cross-cutting piece of work that will now be across the Council, including colleagues from housing and buildings. It is about the built environment in terms of dementia, not just looking at the care elements that we're looking at. So if we look at Cowan Court as an example and what the improved housing has done for people in terms of independence, it's looking at how we can do that across a wider sector. So it's about the training and development. And actually, if we look at people who are going in to do housing repairs, often they might be the first point of contact that someone would have. So raising awareness about dementia with that staff group is really critical in terms of developing those services. In terms of things for older people, you may have seen the coverage on STV earlier on the end of last week. Anne Bond, who's the team leader for the Rapid Response team, and Trish Cantley, who is the community geriatrician, were both on talking about what Cowan Court does and what our Rapid Response team does, which was a fantastic, well-received piece of work that's been going on. Self-directed support comes into play on the 1st of April. It's going to be a really significant change to the way that we assess and deliver services, and that's across both myself and Joan in terms of children and families. We do have a members' seminar that's set for the 8th of April, so we'll be giving a detailed update at that point in time. But we are on track in terms of how we're moving things forward to be compliant from the beginning of April. In terms of challenges and risks, would pick up the large-scale investigation issue. I have been emailing members some updates, but it was just a flag that we still have ongoing concerns about Pittendreek Care Home. You may have seen the coverage on the BBC website recently around that. We are doing an awful lot to work alongside them, but we have been for a number of months, and we're probably not seeing the level of improvement that we would like to see. I would stress that all of the residents within Pittendreek are safe, and we have our staff in on a really regular basis to ensure that that's the case. However, we're still not seeing the improvements from the staff that are employed by St Philip's to provide that care. Drummond Grange, we've had some concerns about recently. It's not technically subject to a large-scale investigation, but there are some concerns about the culture within the home. And in terms of the community, there was one care-at-home provider where a member of staff has been charged with theft, and obviously as they were in and out of a number of people's homes who were vulnerable, we've had to change key safes on a number of those and have been in communication with them and their families to do that. So we're on top of that, but it was just to flag that there has been a lot of protection work that's been going on recently. I'll leave that for questions.
Thanks, Alison. Any questions, guys? None? Alison, just from me then probably, is the ongoing concerns that you have with Pittendreek, because this isn't just a new ongoing concern with this nursing home. This, for maybe the last 5 years, continues to flag up. At what stage do we just say enough and pull away failure altogether? Because we can't just keep going along the route saying, well, we've got concerns, or sooner or later, if something goes wrong, somebody's going to look back and say, well, you had the same concerns 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago. At what point do we just say, enough, and we pull for there?
I would probably like to now, but the difficulty is finding a number of care home beds to move all of those people to. The other issue we have is that none of the families want us to move the relatives, and the individuals there themselves who have capacity don't want to move. So where we've even had opportunities recently to try and move people out, because actually with having a moratorium on admissions since July, the numbers have decreased considerably. We're not considering restarting admissions anytime soon. To some extent, the business will run itself down during this period. But the families and the relatives and the individuals themselves like the quality of care that they are receiving and do not want us to do anything to move them at all. I think you're right. We've got a real issue with some of these post-performing organisations. I have a duty. For me to close the care home sooner, I could pull my staff out and the care inspectorate will close them, because they're not able to meet the standards that they want. But I have a duty of care to ensure that people are safe, which means to say that I'm doing enough to keep those people safe and to meet the standards for the care inspectorate. That means that they won't close the care home. And it's a real dilemma between getting that closure notice, because the families aren't allowing us to move people out on a voluntary basis. So I've either got to go for a closure notice or get the organisation to do something differently. And we're really, really struggling with this. You're right, it's been ongoing for a number of years in Pittendraig.
Is there any way you could perhaps help us maybe understand what the issues we have? Because your answer's kind of surprising me, because I would have thought if I had a parent, relative, friend or that in a nursing home that wasn't performing, I think I would be demanding that that they go somewhere, and it just doesn't seem to balance out. And I kind of it's going to be hard for you maybe to let us know the crux or the details of this, but is there anything you can help us to understand with what your concerns are that we are having to support with? Because I find your answer there very strange, that we've got these concerns, yet the people who should really have these concerns didn't want to move their relatives.
You often end up with a level of guilt from relatives that they've chosen somewhere, and I think it's often not wanting to accept that things might be better. I think also if it's the only care home that you've ever been in, you've got nothing to compare it against in terms of that. So that's often some of the reasons why people don't do that. The concerns have changed over time, but a lot of it has been around recording of certain things and around their, I think it's a management issue as much as anything else, and with their senior staff. So the care staff themselves have lacked some of the training and skills to do things, but with the right support and direction, they're doing okay. Quality of care plans, sharing of information hasn't been good. There's been some fundamental things like there's not been hot water on a couple of floors within the buildings, and care staff were using cold water to wash residents in. We've had issues and concerns about nutrition, about the medications, even actually just personal care, looking at the state of residents. I am surprised that family members aren't concerned when they're going in, because certainly we are when we're going in and seeing residents that we know quite well. Certainly my staff team know them all exceptionally well. We do spot checks at a range of different times, certainly Thursday night. A couple of our senior staff went in at 9 o'clock at night and stayed through till all of the residents were in bed, just to see what that routine is like. They went in fairly recently at breakfast time to see what that was like and followed that through as well. So we've been really significantly monitoring and flagging concerns, but we're not seeing any sustainability of any changes that are put in place.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, to be honest, I can understand why the administrative managerial side, the families wouldn't really know that these things weren't getting done until something goes wrong. So I can kind of understand that. The fact that they're maybe not noticing some more fundamental shortcomings that you've just described is concerning. But could it be the case that these are pretty isolated incidents, or do we think that they're, you know, the direct sort of basic care that you've just described as being failing to some extent. Are these just isolated incidents, or is it pretty systematic that these things are occurring?
It's been fairly systematic, I think, certainly for everybody at some point in time. It's been very noticeable. We don't get all of the information because there are a number of the residents there who don't have capacity, aren't able to share that information with us because of dementia, but I would have thought that if you were in visiting a relative regularly, you would notice. What I can say is we've done a DMT briefing report, and I'm happy to share that offline with people. That gives more detail in terms of some of the concerns and in terms of some of the actions that we've put in place, if that would be helpful, rather than going into too much detail here.
Thanks for that. I think that would be helpful. Brian?
Just maybe a bit more generally on the PIs, and the questions I'm thinking about is when's a complaint, you know, and how do you actually score the number of complaints? Does a contact centre will give you complaints. The social work department, the officers come back with complaints from individuals actually, you know, being spoken to, you know, shall we say on site, you know, at the coalface, and does that become a complaint? And does your department get direct complaints via email or whatever, direct to yourself or other members of staff on the complaint issues on adult and community care? And maybe moans or observations, and you know, when does it actually become a complaint? You know, rather than just a concerned issue. And if it's something like Pendry, you know, if one mentions, you know, something, aye, that's right, and somebody else complains about it, does it become another complaint, or is it just that issue just stands as the one complaint for that one particular issue? Only in the PI's kind of format. I'm not talking about in common sense, eh?
Complaints are logged formally. Often a lot of low-level complaint will be dealt with by the worker on an individual basis. So it might be that someone's saying that somebody didn't turn up on Tuesday. We wouldn't necessarily log that as a formal complaint if we can deal with that in a satisfactory manner with people. It would tend to be a formal complaint if it's been escalated above just phoning your named worker to find out how you're dealing with something like that. We do have a complaints officer who will deal with it and coordinate the responses for the social work complaints to ensure that there's someone independent of the actual issue who's taking that forward in terms of investigation. And we do get complaints that are sent directly, either emailed to myself or the complaints officer or other senior managers, and those are all logged and collated together. We may log more than one complaint if it's about the same issue. Pitt and Dreek, they weren't logged as complaints, they were adult protection concerns, so they were dealt with in a slightly different way through casework, but we would log all complaints that came through, although we might, at the point we were doing a quarterly report on complaints, highlight that 4 of the complaints were about home care issues, for example, in the same way. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Alison, thank you. Can we move on to item 4A2, Housing and Community Safety? Kevin?
Thank you, Chair. In the past quarter for housing strategy, the focus has been in terms of preparation for the CES plan. We're in the midst of that process from quarter 3 and heading to conclusion in quarter 4, along with our colleagues in planning. Our focus is particularly in terms of housing need and demand assessment, so that the submission can be made to the Scottish Government in the first quarter of this calendar year. The key points in terms of the housing needs demand assessment are the housing market, migration, as well as needs and demand for housing, as that provides the evidence base for the housing supply targets defined in the local housing strategy. In quarter 3, we started work in terms of partnership working with Environmental Health and Trade and Standards Services between Mid Lothian and East Lothian Council from the 4th of November. We last reported on the preparation for that pilot, but that is in effect in the 3rd quarter. Again, that will be reported in due course back to committee, as there is a 12-month pilot period running for this project. Similarly, we're looking at current partnership prospects in criminal justice social work, particularly in terms of the Willow project, which is criminal justice centre specifically for women but we're looking at extending that beyond other mainstream needs for women in Midlothians. In terms of community safety, we were working through in the Community Safety Partnership for the Community Planning Partnership, the strategic assessment within that thematic group for the Single Midlothian Plan priorities for the coming year. In challenges, there was with environmental health contaminated land situation in Midlothian, and that was brought forward to Cabinet in the last quarter, where the contaminated land policy and equally a cost recovery and hardship policy were agreed to arrange remediation of that particular site. A further challenge has been in terms of youth homelessness, as 45% of all homeless presentations from 2012 have been those aged 25 and under, and we've piloted a youth prevention team for a 12-month period, and in the last quarter the evaluation of that project saw it being mainstreamed into the homeless team services, as that has been both cost effective and has had qualitative outcomes for the service users. Further challenges in terms of welfare reform, as we reported to members this morning. The focus in this context for housing and community safety is homelessness, whilst our trend is matching now the national trend, which is downwards in terms of homeless presentations. The effect of welfare reform for this particular client group is that they tend to stay in our temporary accommodation and bed and breakfast for a longer period, due to the effects of the bedroom tax restricting the eligible size of property for those clients. However, there are proposals in place which will ideally see the number of bed spaces being used being reduced, both in terms of improving the environment for people in temporary accommodation and the cost effects for the homelessness budget. I'm happy to pause there for any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Kevin. Questions, comments? Jim?
I am glad to see that the youth homelessness prevention team has been a success, Kevin. It's quite striking that 45% of the homeless presentations are for under 25s. It's indicating here that it's successful, but what kind of numbers are we talking about here in terms of that group or presenters? How many of them have been diverted away to alternatives, if you like, to homelessness? Just a wee bit more a feel for what sort of figures we're talking about, how successful it is.
Certainly we provided that detail in the evaluation report to Cabinet in order to make the case for that to be mainstreamed as a service, and certainly, as you can see, I am struggling to find that report, and I suspect it may be the one thing I haven't brought with me. It's okay, I'll go provide that. Yeah, I don't seem to have that, but there is a benefits realisation report from that project, and I will certainly share that with Councillor Muirhead after committee. Sorry, it has been positive outcomes, evidently, in terms of both cost for the council and the qualitative in terms of the individuals themselves and families, because there has been a realisation to those who have had a family breakdown or a relationship breakdown as they present to us, making them aware of what the implications are for the household, particularly if that frees up a bedroom and ultimately becomes under occupation as a result of the family member being ejected from the property, for the want of either additional support or more structured engagement in terms of education or employment, because it isn't just a housing focus that the team have been providing, it's been beyond that to have further engagement with the individual. But as I say, we do have detailed, and indeed there are case studies within the evaluation report, which I'll share with you.
I do recall seeing some figures on this, and I guess I was really just looking to see if there was an update. It may well be that I've already seen the kind of figures that you're talking about, because I do recall having a conversation. Did it come to Cabinet recently, or? Yes,
it would have been in the last quarter of my yeah, the last 2-3 months it did come to Cabinet.
On the bottom of page 28 in the report, in the very last paragraph, I think really what I'm looking for, just a couple of words defined. Bed spaces being used or needed was my kind of question. I would could elaborate a bit further on that. And the report coming in early 2014, can you define early to me? Actually, when is this report coming forward? And is there any other information you can relate to me on that particular paragraph?
Certainly the intention is that we focus, our bed and breakfast provision has been an issue in that we have exported people out with the county in recent years, and our focus has been to accommodate our own homeless people within Midlothian. So it's been extracting from the city has been the main focus in that respect. Having addressed that by and large over the past year, to the fact that other than in other specific specialist cases, and I wouldn't want to go into the detail of that unduly, we're not using accommodation within the city. We are accommodating our own people within Midlothian. So the focus has moved on to the quality and the standards of bed and breakfast provision and temporary accommodation. And there are opportunities within the council making better use of its own assets, which are not necessarily within the control of the housing service at this stage, to utilise those so that we are able to retain people within their own immediate communities. Councillor Pottinger will be familiar with a recent challenge that I had at a public open meeting in Gore Bridge in terms of over-provisioning for HMOs for people out with the immediate vicinity, and it's that type of focus that this is what we're trying to address now. And similarly, it will have cost benefits for the council, again, as well as qualitative issues for households rather than just being placed in bed and breakfast. The proposals would be that we can provide additional support in a more secure and enhanced environment. In terms of specific project, my intention would have been to have that tabled by now, but there's further consultation that is required before we can bring that forward. But I would hope that could be achieved within the next committee or council cycle.
Further questions for Kevin? Okay, Kevin, thank you. Could we move on to item 4B, which is education and communities, children's and families? Is that you, John?
You want to go first? No, no. Afternoon. In relation to children and families, we have a few challenges ahead of us in relation to the Children and Young People's Bill and the implementation of the various things that we must do within this year. One of the big things is in relation to children and young people being supported within care and within our residential units and with foster carers up until the age of 21. We've done some analysis of that. There will be no financial implications in relation to this until 2018. However, we obviously have to look at the training in relation to foster carers if we're asking them to support young adults who obviously get up to things that young adults do, i.e. going out drinking, learning to drive and all the rest of it, where previously young people would have moved on to other areas to live. So our recruitment campaign in relation to foster and adoption has just begun, and there's a 4-page supplement coming out very shortly to the general public within Midlothian to try and recruit further people in relation to this and to support us with it. The named person, as we all know, ongoing discussions with that, and in relation to children's services, we're supporting our educational and health colleagues in relation to understanding what this means for them, how they're going to manage all this information, that they're going to be what is called the named person, and supporting them in doing that. So that's a rolling programme of events in relation to support for that. In relation to SDS, which Alison mentioned, that comes into force on the 1st of April. And initially past it will probably have a bigger impact on children with disabilities. This is something that's going to roll across the whole of children and families and will probably reshape how we look within the next few years as parents and young people get the opportunity to decide themselves who they would wish to care for them, and what that care package will look like, rather than us doing things to people. We will be doing things with people. So that will reshape our services hugely over the next few years, I anticipate. Whilst on the disability team, just to make members aware that the disability team as it is 3 part-time workers and a team leader who leaves us at the end of this month, and the part-time workers will then be based within the locality teams and have different team leaders, and this has been done over a period of time in consultation with them. It is an interim measure at this moment in time as we move forward. We've just started our first meetings in relation to health and social care, and obviously the integration of children's services within that within the next few years as well. So again, that will look very, very different, I would anticipate, in 2 years' time. Our child protection, our figures, I'm happy to say, remain static. Very little movement within them, and I think we've reached a threshold where we're all, as the 3 agencies that do child protection, are reaching a stage where we're confident that we're making good decisions. I'm hoping that that will move forward and we'll get even better outcomes for young people involved in the child protection process once we move into the Public Protection Office based at Brunton Hall on the 1st of April, where we will have our police colleagues, our health colleagues, representatives from children's services, adult services from both Mid and East Lothian, MELDAP, etc. will all be there, violence against women, and we can all come together and get an even better approach into relation to child protection and only deal with the very high level stuff. So that's coming very, very soon. A good news story is that on the 1st of April we're also getting Family Nursing Partnership arriving in Mid Lothian, and that's a new Scottish Government incentive. It's coming here very quickly because they have staff available to do it, and that will target young mums under the age of 19 and offer them ongoing support with the same worker for a 2-year period, which I think will be hugely beneficial, and will support all young mums within Mid Lothian under the age of 19. In relation to challenges, we've still been unable to recruit a family placement team leader in relation to adoption, and as people will be aware, our inspection last year in relation to adoption wasn't the most positive, so that's an area that still carries a bit of risk. We've advertised twice and unfortunately been unable to recruit anyone. As of last Friday, a residential manager left from residential services, so I've spoken with HR this week and we're hastily recruiting a new manager on an interim basis probably for the next 2 years, because again we need to see how that service, what that will look like in 2 years' time. I'm happy to say we've still had no out with Mid Lothian placements in relation to foster care, and there's been no moves to residential placements within the recent months. Early Years Collaborative is ongoing. I have a meeting with East Lothian next week as to how we take that forward. We had the conference in Glasgow in January, and Mid Lothian was shown very well. They showed a video of 3 of our mums in the bedtime story, which went down really, really well, and just was further evidence of the good work that's being done on a universal level in relation to the Early Years Collaborative. So again, that will be getting taken forward. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, John. Questions, comments? Ryan?
Hi, John. I'm talking to you quite a bit recently by email. No alluding to anything that's in that, but I've recently become aware the number of appointments, adoption, fostering people have, with various different lines of social work and adult child care, different agendas. And they've all seem to have got different officers. Do you think this Brunton Hall facility will bring any of this diary kind of together to help streamline that for people who are involved in adoption and fostering? It's the multi-appointments that seems to be quite difficult for many people to manage. Some of them are quite short notice. Some of them affects their working life. But is there any way that this protection unit, could you get involved in the multitasking, so that the diary can get streamlined?
I don't think the Public Protection Office will have that remit initially. I mean, it will tend to deal with the higher end public protection things. I mean, I appreciate what you're saying. What we do try to do is in relation to public child protection and in relation to looked after and accommodated reviews is to try and have them as one review, so that we're not asking parents, grandparents, etc., or teachers or anybody to come along to 2 meetings. Unfortunately, we have very little control in relation to safeguarders, the children's reporter, etc., who are additional people that obviously want to have, that are entitled to have some input in relation to further assessing the parent, grandparent, or whoever it may be. Yeah, I don't think that in answering your question, no, the Public Protection Office won't manage that, and it's just about ourselves being as considerate as we can in relation to as little formal meetings as possible, which is obviously what we're trying to do in relation to Girfrey, one plan for one child, and everybody feeds into that rather than having separate plans.
Yeah, just the follow-up would be, you've mentioned various officers that have got to have their input. Is there any way we can coordinate them to even to have the meetings at the same kind of time, day, venue, so they can actually have their separate meetings, but it's not a further burden on another day of another diary?
I think it's something that we could certainly strive to do, yes. As social workers that would be allocated to that case, and I would hope that they would endeavour to meet the needs of parents, grandparents, because people do work. We don't always assume that people aren't working and can come during hours that we are working. And certainly I know that a lot of the social workers within Dalkeith and Pennycook do work longer hours, and are staying in the office late in order to accommodate that. But, that's something I can take back for people to consider.
John?
Yes, Joan, you mentioned the care manager leaving, and the fact that we're hastily recruiting a replacement. Is this something that was sprung on us, or something that we were aware of? Why was it sort of like, I'm not going to pick you up here, but a hasty move to recruit a replacement? Was it procedural issues, or why is it come as a surprise, or why is it such a hasty recruitment process in that circumstance?
It was a hasty departure on his behalf. There was only 2 or 3 people that knew about it, and that was his wish, which obviously led to difficulties in relation to us and to advertising. And obviously we only got a date as to when he was leaving a week before he actually left because of holiday entitlement, etc. Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, John, thank you very much. Communities and support, Kevin, are you playing that role as well?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Generic heads of service, that's the way we're going. The quarter 3, I'll cover the main report, and Anne is here as other colleagues in terms of specific questions members may have on particular services. But in the past quarter, in terms of service priority 2 for minimising the impact of alcohol and drugs misuse, there was a 7-week alcohol truth project delivered at Pennycook High School to increase awareness and knowledge about alcohol harm. In service priority 3, about ensuring children have the best start in life, the early years collaborative work continued, rolling out a bedtime reading project across a number of centres with an increased number of parents than had previously participated, which was a focus to improve parenting and early numeracy and literacy work. Also in quarter 3 we had 24 PEEP groups, attract just short of 3,000 children. The specific details are in the 4th paragraph there. In terms of 145 bookbug sessions in libraries with under 3,000 children and just over 2,000 adults attending. There's a further PEEP group being established in Mayfield and in Gorebridge, also starting. Well, I know they are in place in terms of the library service now. And there's also a worker employed to raise numeracy and literacy for 2-year-old children that are looked after. That post has now been recruited. In terms of service priority 4, to implement strategies for raising attainment and achievement, the Live IT Sidekick scheme in libraries continues to provide volunteer tutors to help learners wishing to develop their IT skills, and library staff are very much involved indeed in the applications for the online process, digital by default in the jargon, for state and welfare benefit eligibility. There was a big lottery award which we received for a 3-year period to support vulnerable young people into supported work placement, and that is similarly taking place at this point in time. For health and wellbeing, the Scottish Library and Information Council awarded the library service £17,500 for a bibliotherapy service, and that post is currently now being recruited, and this will build on the success of the Healthy Reading Medallion scheme, which is a partnership as detailed in the narrative. The Library Service and Records Office has applied for a trainee placement, and the Council was offered a joint trainee placement with the Royal Commission on Ancient and Historical Monuments, which allows us to develop resources for schools in terms of the co-location with school librarians as well as the public library service. Midlothian Science Festival, we again had a successful event with 6,000 visits to 70 registered events and activities across venues. Book Week Scotland also took place in the last quarter. We have a specific evaluation report available for that, where there were 2,500 visitors to 52 events, with a range of class visits across libraries, as well as engendering the culture of reading for pleasure, as well as supporting literacy. The Scottish Library and Information Council funded a project, invited Midlothian to participate in this work with North Ayrshire, which is also about raising awareness for best practice and community engagement and developing staff skills in consultation for public library staff. Service Priority 11, to develop and implement a programme of continuous improvement and additional capacity. We were again successful through the Scottish Library and Information Council in being awarded £20,000 to provide an online database of those in Midlothian who were killed or injured during the First World War. This is work in conjunction with the Volunteer Centre and schools and local history societies to establish the project coordinator role, which is being hosted by the Council. The community learning and development successes, in terms of Vogrie Park, there was a group of young people in the Letting Nature Nurture project who undertook a range of environmental work. The group had developed beyond the expectations in the quality of work that had been carried out there. This group had featured in the Youth Link, which is a publication in terms of the Cashback to Communities event, and that event was launched with Kenny McCaskill providing a profile in November. In terms of Capers 2013, this is a variety show that's performed by young people. This was from Bonnyrigg, Lass Wade and Children's Choir, played 3 nights in excess to an audience of 900 people, which was held in the facilities at the new Lass Wade High School theatre space. The First Challenge project was working with young people. This has been deemed a huge success, with 10 young people completing the project, which was 100% of attendance, and there are further events planned for March and April of this year. And a partnership project which focused on the East operational area in terms of promoting positive achievement was being developed. This attracted 12 volunteers in December, with CLD running 2 group courses starting in February of this year. I'm happy to pause there for questions to me or my colleague Anne, Chair.
Questions? Jim?
About you didn't mention in the challenges, Kevin, it talks about the public service network protocols, adverse implication for libraries because of the way their systems are. You mentioned earlier on about digital by default, and obviously, you know, we're trying to push everybody into doing everything online, but obviously a lot of people don't have access to computers and rely on libraries. I'm not, if you can't answer this, that's fine, but do you know if the PSN issue has got an effect on the provision of internet services to our customers in our libraries? You know, is there a link there? Because are our libraries, say, going to be cut off because of the PSN issue, and therefore people won't be able to access internet services and their emails and things like that for our libraries? It's just something that dawned on me when you mentioned digital by default, and I'd seen that concern raised there.
Certainly. Sorry, that was remiss of me. As you say, it is a particular challenge. The short answer is yes, until we approved an upgrade in the library management system, which just was last week, and our IT colleagues, together with library staff, are looking to get that implemented before the cut-off period at May.
Anne?
We're working in Midlothian across partnerships to look at a coherent approach to digital inclusion, basically. So we're trying to set up drop-in sessions and courses to upskill people so that they're able to do this. So that not only will the libraries be available, but the computer suites that we've got within community learning development and some of the PPP2 schools will also be a focus for that. So we're aiming to extend the availability of hardware for people, and we're hoping to supplement that with tutors in order to take people through the processes.
Any other questions? Okay, Kevin, thank you. Now move on to item 4B3, which is education. Suzanne, is that?
Yep, it's me. Thank you. Okay. Now, it's been mentioned by two people already about the Early Years Collaborative, but I just want to emphasise the Early Years Collaborative is really a partnership working and a great development of working together to ensure the better outcomes for families and young people. So we have formed close partnerships across East Lothian and Mid Lothian, but also working with social work, health, police and the third sector. One of the, it maybe sounds a bit simplistic, but it's in one of the things that's really been important for us, is to change our registration system, whereby we can actually note whether children are registered with a dentist or whether they actually have been immunised, and then using that information to feed that back to health, but also targeting schools and targeting families to ensure that maybe there's a greater uptake in relation to these two specific areas. We're also, I forgot to say, adding another field, we've added another field in relation to children of armed forces personnel. So we can now identify those children who are either their parents are in reserve services or on active duty, and therefore we can actually track their progress and put in more support where necessary. We're working with the police in identifying cases where there may be domestic violence, so that we can actually share that information with school staff so that children can be better supported. So the Early Years Collaborative is actually quite a far-reaching collaborative which is going to, as it evolves, become a bigger and better support for the children in our community. I think it's been mentioned about the Big Bedtime Read, and that was certainly nationally recognised, but we also had a visit from the Danish government, who visited Stobhill Primary School, where they actually met the parents who have been involved in this, and it was a very, very positive visit for all involved, and our visitors were very impressed by the work that we're undertaking there. As part of that as well, one of the other tests of change that we're taking forward, and it's part of school work as well, but further across community working with parents, is raising children with confidence. And this is an initiative which has been taken forward in other authorities as well, but we're involving parents, helping them in child development, and it has had very, very positive feedback from parents. We've yet to look at the impact and track it to the children to see if their progress has improved because of the work that's been done. But we've got quite a large number of people trained to deliver this, and the hope is also that we will actually involve parents in developing their own learning so they themselves can become trainers and take part and further their qualifications. All our psychologists have been trained in delivering confident staff, confident children, and the expectation is that all our schools will deliver this training over the next 3 years. So that's been very positive. The next one is positive but also a challenge, in that we have now got to take forward the increase in preschool. It's now called early learning and childcare hours, from 475 hours to 600. Midlothian was one of the first to carry out extensive consultation with parents, and we received a huge number of responses from our parents, as well as direct face-to-face meetings. We're now at the stage where we have identified a preferred model, and there'll be a paper coming to Council to take that further, and we can have further discussions with that. It will come into the challenges later on when I mention that later as well. GIRFIC, I think that Joan mentioned about GIRFIC. It's been extensive work about taking that forward and developing the toolkit with staff as well, and people being able to access a wellbeing toolkit. Looking at the priority for raising attainment, certainly this year we were pleased with the results. They're still not as positive as we'd like, but we certainly only had, I think, one area where we actually had a decrease in attainment, and that was only by 1%. Almost every other measure was actually an increase. We had a couple who were the same, but the rest were increasing the measures, and that was very positive for us. And to take that further, we've got a new attainment group where we're looking at really focusing how do we deliver, how do we build on best practice, how do we actually take this forward. So we have an attainment group, secondary school, and we've got an overarching strategic group, and we also have a primary attainment group who are looking to actually make sure that we actually are developing this much further and taking a more strategic and cohesive, comprehensive approach. We're also working closer with colleges, with university, to develop our links and to try and find other opportunities to develop people's skills and to take forward vocational courses as well to support our pupils and young people. The positive destinations, we recognise we've made some inroads in that. There's still quite a bit of work to be done there, but we have improved our position with that, and we have improved the percentage of children who are going into positive destinations, so that hopefully will continue to improve as we make further links with different groups in supporting young people and working closely with young people. We've obviously taken forward the building of a new school, a new Battle school, and consultations are ongoing there, so hopefully that will be positive for the communities that involves. Our challenges, we are committed to raising attainment once more, and to actually having a one council approach where everybody knows what we're really aiming to do and how we're aiming to do that. It is a challenge in relation to our PIP scores, in that even although we've put a lot of work into early years and we have very, very positive reports from our early years centres, both partnership centres and school centres, we still have on entry below average. However, if I go back to the early years collaborative, I think that building on the 27-month to 30-month check information which we'll receive from health will give us that information that we can actually work specifically with young people, because we recognise that particularly in some areas they're coming into our preschool centres at a level below what we would have expected. And the reinstatement of the 27-month to 30-month check should help us in that respect. With regard to attainment, it's not mentioned here, but in our GL assessment attainment, we actually have above average reading attainment in P4 and P7, and we also have above average numeracy attainment in P4. Our challenge is the P7, and with that in mind, we've had a big focus on numeracy this year. Our Visit 3 for schools group managers will be focusing directly on numeracy. We've got money from Education Scotland to provide a development officer part-time who's supporting numeracy, and we're working on a research project with Education Scotland and psychologists to see how we can actually better develop and support young people to develop their early stages of arithmetical learning. That's what we're doing just now. The attainment budget is obviously, our budget will actually impact slightly. We're looking at implementing our ASN budget in a different way, which could potentially impact on attainment, but we'll have to see how that actually works out. The challenge that I mentioned earlier with the increase in hours, that will be a challenge because we have to recruit staff to actually provide enough staff to fulfil the extra hours that we're going to be delivering. And also just recently was mentioned in January that there is now going to be an entitlement for children of workless households to have 600 hours of early learning and childcare. That is a challenge because we don't know how we can actually identify them yet, because we've not had clear guidance. There's some guidance on what, how they would qualify, how people would qualify for that, but also we don't know whether they qualify for different income support, whether they actually have children. So we've got to identify that yet and see where exactly, how can we deliver this, because it will not be possible at present, in this present state, to actually deliver that within our local authority centres. So that's a big challenge for us there. And obviously the challenge for Curriculum for Excellence, in that we're now first year of National 4, National 5, and then next year it'll be National 6. It's whether we'll be able to hopefully deliver that effectively, so we'll have to review progress there over this year. So quite a number of challenges.
Thanks, Suzanne. Questions? Brian?
Just on the last point first, The increasing number of hours, I mean, a lot of people say that it's not a problem if you have to get new staff, because a lot of people want new staff, you know, and there must be people out there that are looking to get into this line of work. But the challenge, I think the biggest challenge is normally more sort of identifying customers, consumers, service users. The big, is the funding followed place for this? You know, is it actually totally funded? You know, that the increase in hours, we would expect the funding to follow for the new legislation. I could have mentioned other things about the named person, you know, and just, you know, looking ahead, because that bill's just now in place. Do you see any resource implications for that? You know, and I know it's at a very early stage, and it's maybe you're maybe not the right person, you know, for me to actually point that question to, but I will be alluring to it further, and I don't know if there's anything you want to at this time add to the discussion on that. And finally, on your service priority, you're talking about the school and authority are working closely with the local community and other partners to ensure that the new school meets the needs of all stakeholders. You know, seems a bit ambitious, yeah, because all stakeholders all have different agendas, you know. And I just, if you maybe just, we maybe consider just taking that word all out that report, you know.
I think to take the last bit, that is ambitious, but there has been quite extensive consultation, and I'm sure you'll agree that it's very difficult to meet the needs of everybody all the time. But I think that through the consultation, they're trying to do their best to provide a new school that will meet the needs of the community while still actually retaining some community links within actual individual areas. But obviously we'll have to wait and see when that actually is taken forward. With regards to your named person, I think it will be an organisational difficulty in a way that we'll have to work through, because there's still the place for the lead professional, and we need to work out what will be the links there, because with regards to 0 to 5, it will be the named person will be the health visitor, but from 5 onwards it will be the head teacher. And so, but we also have a lead professional, say for example, education, the head teacher is a named person, but it might be that the child has complex health needs, and so the lead professional would be someone from health. So it's working out the intricacies of how do we take this forward, how do we make sure that the right person is providing the reports effectively so that we can actually support these young people. And it's not going to be easy, but we're going to have to work on that together. Fortunately, as I said, the collaborative is meaning that we are working much closer together with our colleagues, so hopefully that will help that. With regards to your question about funding, about the 2-year-olds, I think it's my understanding that £50 million has been made available. I'm not sure exactly what Midlothian's amount, but I think it's 1.6% of the 50 million, which somebody said to me comes to approximately about 800,000. But I don't know, I've not got those figures as yet. I think we're looking at approximately 170 children who would be, if we're looking at the approximate figures, who would fall under the looked after, and also children of workless families. So that maybe comes to round about 800,000 actually, as it works out, costing, yeah. So, but it's finding where they are and actually identifying where we can actually provide the places for them. That's a big piece of work that we've got to do. I'm going to a meeting along with Sandra Banks on Friday in Dundee with the Scottish Government and other members of ADES, where hopefully we'll get a bit more information there. Certainly with regards to the 3- and 4-year-olds, we've done an extensive amount of work there, and we are sure that we've got places. We've got extensions being built to certain nurseries within Midlothian, and we've been working very closely with unions to ensure that we can take this forward. However, we are aware that with our workforce, the Scottish Government has got a workforce development group, but as yet, unfortunately, there hasn't been extensive work with colleges to actually increase the numbers of students who are participating in the courses in order to have enough qualified staff, perhaps, to cover everything that we'd like to do. So that's what we've got to look at as well.
Jim?
It's on the issue of the additional hours as well. One of the concerns I had when that announcement was first made was about the financial package that came with it and whether it actually funded it or no. And The monies you're talking about, there's the revenue side here, the revenue funding in terms of funding additional teachers, additional staff, but there's also the capital impacts in terms of, do we have the facilities to, I'm just conscious of the fact that so many of our schools, just by the way we've forced to work, are to capacity, and therefore, if you're talking about adding classrooms on there, you did mention there, extensions there. I wasn't sure if you meant physical extensions or what, but maybe just elaborate on that in terms of the affordability of this, or the fact that the money's coming in is adequate. Also, the issue of the model that's going to be adopted. We're saying that we're now in a position where there's going to be a report coming, because obviously there are a lot of options as to how best to supply these additional hours to suit, I suppose, a whole range of interests, including that of parents. I think consultation took place on that, and I just wondered if, when we say a model, are we talking about a model? Is it feasible to have more than one model? Because I would expect that the reasons for going with a particular model might be a kind of demographic thing. In terms of the interests of the parents, for instance, in terms of how we structure the day and things like that. Is it one model? Is that the only feasible way of doing it?
We were tasked by the Scottish Government to consult with parents in order to try and identify what would support communities, and that's what we actually did. We gave them a couple of options, but we also said, please comment and let us know if there's anything else that you would be better suit you. The vast majority, 86% of our respondees said that what they wanted was a basic just increase in hours, because we had thought we maybe could offer a holiday entitlement, or over Christmas time, Easter time. Very, very few people actually wish to have that particular model. So what we're looking at doing is actually providing some flexibility initially through our partnership centres. And after Easter, we'll have actually 16 partnership centres. The partnership centres will be able to deliver the early learning and childcare in blocks of up to 8 hours. And because they have a bit more flexibility within staffing, they will be able to do that. So we're providing a bit more flexibility through our partnership centres initially. Meanwhile, with the model we are actually providing is the model that most people wanted initially. And we will then reconsult with parents next year and the beginning of the following year to see if this model actually suits their needs, and see if we can maybe make some adaptations to the model itself, depending on local needs. The difficulty is to try and put in place a model that we can get the staffing to actually fit in as well. It's not particularly easy. And to go back to the capital funding, there is some capital funding. It is not a lot. I mean, you know what it costs to build a classroom. I mean, the capital funding would not necessarily cover that, but it would go towards helping with extensions. We have already identified extensions for Cornbank Primary School in Pennycook, and also for St Andrews in near Go Bridge, and for Newton Grange as well. So we've got 3, last year we had an extension for Dander Hall. So we have been proactive in trying to look at extensions within the areas as well. And we've taken on board 2 new partnership centres this year as well, to try and ensure that we do have some capacity. But the difficulty is certainly for the 2-year-olds, because when we're looking at 2-year-olds, the ratio of staff to 2-year-olds is 1 member staff to 5 children, and the floor space that they actually have, it's a bigger floor space that you need to have, and there's an increased number of toilets needed as well. So that's the difficulty in trying to accommodate them within the local authority. And that's why we may have to use partnership centres, childminders, playgroups, look at different options. So that's a task to be undertaken.
Joe?
Yeah, Convener, I attended Stobhill on the day of the Danish MP's visit to Stobhill to make presentations to some of the parents. And I would just like to congratulate everybody that was involved in the collaborative. And it was very encouraging to hear the parents say how the behaviour changes had taken part in their children. So congratulations to everybody on that.
So Suzanne will take that back. Any other questions? Okay, Suzanne, thank you. So the last item for
So the
today.
last question. Suzanne, what's your second name?
Dane. Okay. Last item for today is 4B4, which is planning and development. Ian, I take it that's your remit.
Thanks, Chair. In terms of economic recovery, then the Medallion Economic Recovery Plan is currently being finalised in its final draft form and is due for reporting to Council on the 25th of this month. And I think, as I've explained before, that is a focus on, it's really focusing a lot of the activities which have been going on for a number of years, but actually looking at key areas of activity that need to be the subject of greater scrutiny and greater effort in trying to drive forward the various aspects of economic development, inward investment, employability, jobs growth, infrastructure, links into the education sector, a whole series of issues. Just whilst we're on economic recovery, the Business Gateway service is very busy at the present time. We're heading towards what was something like 250 businesses assisted this year. And it's not just startups. It's also advice to businesses who are growing or even those who want to have some advice from our people on things like HR or financing. And also, indeed, from time to time, actually seeking to save businesses. There's one particular company not far from here which has had a very difficult time, and I would say that the intervention of one of our Business Gateway advisors has been sufficient to help that company to have a new lease of life. So there's a fair bit of being done on the Business Gateway side. In terms of strategic and local planning, as I've mentioned before, in terms of the strategic development plan, the supplementary planning guidance on the additional housing identified for the 6 component districts of the set plan area. That is due for submitting to the Minister shortly with the expectation it be approved in June of this year. And that provides, at least finally, a strategic development plan platform in terms of the housing numbers to take forward through the local development plan. And as you know, the actual additional figure for Midlothian is a minimal figure which will not affect the overall direction of the local plan. There's also been an extensive amount of work being prepared on the housing need and demand assessment for the Cessplan area. That's what Kevin referred to slightly earlier, what's called the Honda Housing Needs and Demands Assessment. And that's for the next iteration of the Strategic Development Plan. But what I would say about that new Strategic Development Plan, the accent is very much on economic recovery and the development of the city region. And also linked in with that, regionally significant infrastructure items, not just transport, but issues like broadband as well. In terms of the local plan, as you recall, the local development plan went out to public consultation through the MIR main issues report last year, finishing in August. There were reports of information in the autumn in terms of the numbers of responses, around about 2,100. The analysis of that is going to be brought before member seminar in about a couple of weeks' time, which members hopefully have been advised of. That really is the point at which members then set the direction for how they want to go to the next stage, which is the proposed plan. And there are a number of key decisions, not the least of which in terms of housing allocations and their location, but also things like whether the Council wishes to press on and identify in the proposed plan, for example, the new A701 Relief Road at Strayton round the back of Bilston. Progress on shore fare is good. We're now at the stage whereby in terms of the negotiation between officers and the consortium of Buccleuch Properties and McTaggart and Mickle, we've pretty much agreed on the draft heads of terms, and we're now at the stage where the legal agreement has actually been drawn up, and there are now meetings with the solicitors present to get to the position whereby we will be able to sign up the agreement. I would have thought that's now a matter of just a couple of months away. The planning consent could be released, and I know that McTaggart and Mickle are looking to start on the first phase as quickly as they can. And just to mention, the legal fees for the council are being paid by the developers as applicants, just to cover that. In terms of the community asset transfer policy, there was a seminar back in November with members, and the officers were asked to reconsider and think through some of the aspects raised by members there. There is something of a learning experience being drawn from the Bonninrig Leisure Centre case, and again that's a matter to come back before members following the consideration of the bids for the former Bonninrig Leisure Centre. But certainly we would look to be trying to get that community asset transfer policy, the overall council policy, into some sort of shape in the next couple of months, ready for putting before members. The Conservation Area Regeneration Scheme at Gore Bridge is up and running, launched, as you know, last year. In terms of the project officer, his input will change from 1 day a week to 3 days a week come the summer, but he's already been in touch with the owners of the New Buyers Hall, which is the key building, and also with most of the owners of properties who will be eligible for grant. And we're confident that given his experience at Dalkeith that he will do a good job in coordinating matters at Gore Bridge. In terms of the planning, so in terms of the performance indicators, the building standards ones remain good, I'm glad to say. Planning applications performance still remains good. Good to see an improvement in the non-householder applications, which was something of a poor area for us in previous times. The planning performance framework, which is the Scottish Government requirement of an annual submission in terms of how the planning service is performing. The next submission of that for the 13-14 year is due in June. But in terms of the report on the previous 12-13 year, I'm intending to bring that to members at the next planning committee. Just one other thing to mention, because this is the first meeting since there's been a change in the service structure of the council. So, and as you know, I now look after the Communities and Economy Service. That brings together a number of regulatory services, and I think that's an advantage in terms of performance reporting. It also provides a more coherent link between development planning and community planning, so that we can actually take together the physical and the environmental environmental and economic improvements to areas which actually make a difference at the end of the day to communities. It's the economic and the physical which are both important. So I just mentioned that in passing, and that's a theme which I certainly want to pick up in terms of driving forward some of the overall council objectives and key areas of priority activity in terms of this particular new service.
Thanks, Ian. Questions, comments? None? Okay. Ian, thank you, and thank you for your attendance.